Good afternoon. I'm Jay Frost. You may know that already. Thank you very much for signing up for this great session. I'm the host of the Philanthropy Mastermind series, which is presented by DonorSearch. So first, I would like to thank DonorSearch for providing this platform where we can bring great people like we're doing today to you so you can learn from them, exchange ideas with them, get answers to those pertinent questions you have. All of that is the result of this series that we've been doing in one form or another since 2016. And we're so glad that you have made time to participate in this. This is, of course, a CFR accredited session today. So if you are collecting those credits, I hope you'll enjoy that. You'll find other sessions in this series over at YouTube. And before we even begin, I want to let you know that this happens just about every week. We have 90 programs that will be offered this year through this series of either webcasts, CFR accredited webinars, or podcasts, including a session coming up next week with Poonam Prasad on making the best use of your new year-end donors. I'm sure you'll enjoy that. And also a session in our podcast series, which is audio only, and you can pick up on your favorite podcasting platforms with Armando Zumaya, and that loads tomorrow. So we're looking forward to your questions. And in fact, I already see one is popping up, so keep that coming. Thank you, James. You're going to find that the way you can interact today is solely through the Q&A panel. So we can't see or hear you, but we want to hear from you. Please do as James has done by leading the charge here and post questions or comments as they occur to you throughout. But now what I'm going to do is take a moment to introduce our presenter today. And that's, of course, Bathsheba Philpott, who is right here on the screen. You can see her right now. So hello, Bathsheba. I want to just tell you a little bit about her and then get out of the way so she can share some of her thoughts and wisdom on this subject of entrepreneurial approaches to corporate and foundation fundraising success. That's the theme of the session today. If you're in the wrong place, stay. You'll really gain from it. And if you have colleagues who can't be with you today, once again, this will be on YouTube afterwards, but stick around so you can participate. Bathsheba is Vice President for Advancement at the American Council on Education. If you don't know them, please write that down and look them up afterwards. In this role, she's responsible for leading strategy, planning, and engagement with individuals, foundations, corporations, governments, and other organizations to advance the mission and programs of ACE. And in fact, as we were talking before, she was talking a bit about that work. Much of it focuses on this CFR lens, where they do exceptional work and really lead the charge in that kind of work for higher education in the country. She has more than 20 years of experience in advancement, and she's served in 3 successful national fundraising campaigns in this neck of the woods, if you're in the DC area, which ranged from $500 million to $1.5 billion. Which were at George Washington University, Smithsonian Institution, and the Children's National Health System, really exceptional institutions all. Her advancement career also includes tenures at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and the Alliance for Healthy Homes. And throughout her career, she's personally secured more than $50 million in philanthropic sponsorship and other forms of support. She's spoken all around, including the place where I first had the honor of meeting her, which was through AFP DC, where she was also the founding co-chair of the African American Affinity Group, and in the AFPDC chapter. And that's important, of course, because AFP is the DC chapter is, I believe, the largest in the country. So lots of exceptional work there. But you can learn more about her, of course, over the ACE site. So I won't read her entire bio because I want to give her the time to share with you today. So with that, I want to thank you, Bathsheba, for hanging out today and for teaching us. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jay, and welcome everyone. I'm really excited to spend some time with you this afternoon and to engage in what I hope will be a conversation around entrepreneurial approaches to corporate and foundation fundraising success. I'm looking at some of the questions that are being posed in the chat, and I look forward to talking about those a little bit further along in the program today. So I wanted to, first of all, start by defining what I mean when I think of entrepreneurial approaches to your corporate and foundation fundraising strategy. So I think of this sort of just as I articulated here. It is approaching this work in a very strategic manner, and I'll talk a little bit about that, as we go further in the presentation. It is curious, right? It is also optimistic, right? So approaching these conversations and this engagement and the solicitation and stewardship in a fashion that is really centered along long-term engagement, which I'll talk a little bit more about shortly, It is also flexible, right, in the sense that it is responsive to the feedback and the needs and the vision and goals of the institutions that we're seeking to partner with. And it's also about forming connections that really advance your shared mission, vision, and values. And notice that I underscored the word shared here, because it really is about two-way engagement. So it's both about advancing your organization's mission, vision, and values, and equally important, if not in some ways more important, advancing the shared mission and values and vision of the corporate and foundation partner that you're engaging with. So I wanted to also highlight or sort of mention three things that I think are really key to our work with corporations and foundations. So foundations, as we know, operate in the public interest, right? So they are really about advancing the public good. They're about impact. They're about, changing people's lives, right? And changing, the society, for the benefit of the public, right? Corporations, I would say, by and large, not taking into account corporate foundations, which fall in the first bucket. Although I would say even on the corporate foundation side, this is true to some extent as well. It's really about serving the primary interests of the owners, right? So how can they advance their brand visibility? How can they partner in thoughtful ways to get their leaders, their subject matter experts in front of the public, right? Particularly the ones that are providing services, consulting, technology services, et cetera. And in both cases, there's a desire for impact, right? So they are really, really focused on where can I get the most bang for my buck, or the biggest return on that sponsorship, grant, or other investment. So really, really want to underscore the impact part of this. So as I mentioned earlier, strategic engagement really starts with the vision and goals of the prospect, right? So we have to do our due diligence up front to ensure that when we're going into these conversations, we have done our homework, right? We've looked at what they've invested in the past. We have considered a new strategic plan if they have one, right? New strategic goals if those are outlined. We have really done our homework up front. We've looked at their leadership. We've looked at institutions that their leadership have served in the past. We've looked at, if we're engaging with a program officer, we've looked at that person's background, but we've really, really done our homework up front. We go into those conversations ideally with some ideas around common interest and intersection, right? So to the extent that, let's take the Gates Foundation, for example. So as Jay mentioned, I serve as Vice President of Advancement with an organization called the American Council on Education. For background, ACE represents colleges and universities. We have more than 1,700 member institutions across the country, across all sectors of higher education. The bulk of our philanthropic and sponsorship support, charitable support more broadly, is coming from corporations and foundations. So one of those foundations, we actually just met with them last night here on the West Coast. In the conversation that we had with them, we really centered it around this idea of common intersectionality and interest, right? So their post-secondary education strategy really is centered in equity, and it's about moving the needle for students of color, moving the needle for low-income students, moving the needle for first-generation college students. So that was really the foundation upon which we built the rest of the conversation with them. And then thirdly, I want to underscore this idea about rules of engagement, right? So in most cases, companies, foundations have some sense of rules of engagement, right? So first order of engagement may be with a program officer. First order of engagement may be someone on the senior leadership team, right? It's really about thinking or considering how they want to engage with you, which, certainly understandably is not always apparent when we're going into these conversations. But, with some digging, certainly looking up at the front end, around existing partnerships or existing connections that you have either through your board or through your staff, you can kind of get a sense of where best to engage with them. So really, really, really important point there. So one of the things I want to underscore too is the importance of listening, right? And going into these conversations, particularly with new prospects that we're engaging, we want to go into those conversations with a sense of curiosity. And we want to ask questions and listen a lot more than we talk at the front end. So some key questions that I often ask in those conversations is, what are you seeking to achieve through your philanthropic and sponsorship goals? So recognizing that on the foundation side, in most cases, this is spelled out pretty well on their website, right? In most cases, you go to their website, you can look at their strategy in terms of their grant making. You can oftentimes uncover what institutions they've invested in already. But I still say it's a good idea to go into those conversations asking that question. Why do I say that? One reason is that in some cases, I've gone into conversations where they just finished a new strategic plan, right? They're working on a new strategic plan, at the time of that conversation. And so you can often glean insights in asking that question. You can often glean insights into that new vision or strategy that might be emerging, right? So really, really important at the front end, I think, to ask, what are they seeking to achieve? Also, another great question is, what are a few examples of successful partnerships with nonprofit organizations, right? So one of the organizations that we work with pretty closely, I'll just call them out here, is TIAA. As most of you know, TIAA has a huge footprint in the higher education sector, right? They are a longstanding partner with us. And, as much as we have deep roots with them, we find ourselves having to step back and revisit that strategy each time we go into a new conversation with them, right? Leadership changes help to drive strategy, as we know. What's happening in the world right now and how they want to respond. So think about COVID as one example, how they want to respond to those changes that are occurring in the world. But so it's always a great idea to ask about, again, what are they seeking to achieve? And also examples of successful partnerships with nonprofit organizations. Another question is defining and measuring impact. So at the end of the day, what's most important to them, right? Is it the number of people that you're touching? Is it partnering in ways that advance their goals in terms of putting their thought leaders, their leadership in front of your audience? Thinking again here mostly about corporate, but not exclusively. Is it also about looking at the ways in which their strategic goals are being sort of manifest in the work that you're doing, or the project that you're putting forward? So those are some key sort of questions, again, to ask around impact. So what is it exactly that you want to see from the work that you invest in? Okay, is a question I certainly always ask in these meetings with corporations and foundations. And then where have they received or achieved the greatest return on their investment, right? What are the key objectives, et cetera, et cetera. So really, really important questions to ask in those conversations. The other thing I would say is it's important to engage as thought partners, particularly, although not exclusively on the foundation side. I think this is also true for companies as well. But foundations, particularly the large national foundations like Gates, like Cresby, like Ford, like Rockefeller, like Hewlett, like the many others that exist in this country, a lot of the individuals that we engage with at the program officer level are subject matter experts, right? So I think it's really, really important that we engage with them in that way. Equally, on the corporate side, while in the CSR programs, in the corporate social responsibility programs, you may not always be partnering with a subject matter expert, yet I would keep in mind that they are subject matter experts in terms of what the company is seeking to achieve with its sponsorship and philanthropic investments, if you're talking on the corporate foundation side. So really important to share ideas and experiences, talk about ways that you can, again, advance their shared goals through, leveraging the leaders in your organization and the subject matter experts in your organization, thinking about ways that you can bring light to, if they're publishing research or if they're doing other work outside of their philanthropic giving, thinking about ways that you can shine a light on that work, again, to advance, and enhance the work that they're doing. And I would say a second point around this is, again, looking at ways to engage beyond funding. So certainly, yes, we want philanthropic dollars, we want sponsorship dollars, but we also want to build relationships. So, one of the things I've learned over time is I think this is something that our peers, our major gift peers who do, individual donor work, they get the importance of building relationships. I do think that sometimes gets lost in the CFR work. It tends to, in some cases, be approached more transactionally. So we're going to a funder or prospect and we're presenting an idea, hoping to get a grant, hoping to get a sponsorship, right? But we really need to be thinking about ways that we can, again, engage as thought partners, right? Ways in which we can advance their mission, vision, and values, right? Ways that we can collaborate outside of purely, receiving a grant or sponsorship. So I really, really want to underscore that point. Strategic partnerships are longstanding. So one of the reasons it's, again, important to engage with them, as thought leaders, important to engage with them beyond philanthropy, is that we really want to build relationships. We really want to build partnerships with them so that they come to us, when they're thinking about developing a new strategic plan, when they're thinking about changes to their investment strategy in terms of their philanthropic, corporate social responsibility strategy, that they leverage us as thought partners on that work. One of the key ways I think we can sort of share and be thought leaders with them is by exploring challenges and opportunities, right? Engage in a conversation. We shouldn't go into these conversations one-sided, right? So here's the world as we see it. We also want to hear from them, hear their thoughts, hear their insights, hear what they're hearing from other grantees, other organizations that they're sponsoring and supporting. We really want to, again, engage in a two-way conversation and partner with them in strategic and thoughtful ways. So, of course, we want to highlight the key strengths of our organization and sort of what we do that is unique and different from the many other nonprofits that exist, the 1.7 million, I think, total nonprofits that exist across the country. How are we different? What are our key strengths? What do we bring to the table? What are we doing differently, right? And how can we partner in ways that go beyond that philanthropic or sponsorship investment? And then thirdly, aligning values where possible. Now, this may not always be true. We've worked with some foundations and companies where, you almost hesitate a little bit because let's say there's been some controversy around, their business goals, how they treat their employees. So I can think of several, I won't name them here, but, oftentimes, or in some cases, there are controversies that come along with, a company or a foundation. And so to the extent possible, though, where, an organization is still, interested in engaging, we want to look at aligning our values where possible. So patience. So the reason I put this here is oftentimes, we are, as development professionals, we are given goals. We have a amount of time, whether it's 12 months, 6 months, 18 months to reach those goals. That being said, we really, if we're going to engage strategically, if we're going to engage thoughtfully with, corporate foundation partners or future partners, we need to do so in a manner that is, respectful to the feedback that they're giving us, that also, is thoughtful about their timeline, right? So they don't move, they never move as quickly as we would like, right? And so we really want to exercise a degree of connections, right? Certainly do our necessary follow-up when we're cultivating a relationship. We send over information, et cetera. Do the follow-up that's necessary. Look for ways to engage them, beyond, outside of the conversation. If you have just released a report, or there's some other body of work that you think is relevant to the conversation that you're having with them. Look for ways to engage them around that work. And then being receptive to input. So this one, I think in particular, tends to be very true, not exclusively on the foundation side, but when we're engaging with foundations where you're working with subject matter experts, oftentimes it is a very iterative process. Almost everything, having worked for a number of large national organizations and even international organizations, I can say that by and large, most of the work we did in the CFR space was very iterative with our partners. It was never completely one-sided where we were taking an idea to them, putting a bow on it and handing it off, and then they gave us a check. 9 times out of 10, there is, information being shared back and forth. They're providing input. They are sharing insights from other investments that they've made, et cetera. So being receptive to input, I know sometimes that can be a challenge when we have internal subject matter experts that do the world in a certain way and may not necessarily agree with the viewpoints of, a particular funder. But again, to the extent possible, I think that's where we come in, because I often feel that I have to be as much an advocate in helping my colleagues, my internal subject matter experts in leadership understand how foundations and corporations work, right? As much as I have to be an advocate, for the organization with that funder prospect. So again, just being receptive to that input. And again, acting in the interest of our organization while keeping the goals of the prospect in mind, to that point as well. So we want to make sure we're doing both. So do your homework, which is something that I shared at the beginning. One of the things I always do is make sure I put the right people in the room. The other thing I'll say, and I didn't write this down, is, I never, ever, if I can help it, submit a proposal blindly or a sponsorship request blindly without making some sort of connection first. So I feel like that's almost sort of a basic principle of CFR development, but I do know that in some cases, I think the default position is to just go ahead and submit something, right? So do your homework up front, certainly before you go into any conversation. Make sure you're engaging with the right people in the room, right? So thinking about internally who your best advocates and ambassadors for the work are, who can best speak to it, who are your best subject matter experts, and then also who you feel can best engage in that way. Because, we all have worked in organizations and with individuals who are very good at what they do. But when it comes to making the case, when it comes to engaging, that's not necessarily their strong suit. So I think we need to really balance putting the right person in the room that can actually speak to the work, but also at the same time, they can actually engage and make a case with you. So that's very, very important. And then network. So one of the ways that I found to be really helpful in terms of making connections, I think, in some ways, particularly on the corporate side, when you look at a corporate website, you're trying to glean, what their sponsorship and philanthropic goals are, who the right person to connect with. Particularly that last one, who the right person to connect with, it's not always easy, right? So you're sometimes having to, go to LinkedIn, look at other resources to try to figure out, okay, who is the right person to talk to here? So I also feel that it's really, really important, if you're not doing this, to put yourself in spaces where you can make those connections, right? So, whether it is with, through the Chamber of Commerce or through conferences or other spaces where there is a presence of philanthropies, of companies, certainly we want to be doing that, getting out there, making those connections. So one example, one of our funders hosted a summit where they brought together a group of nonprofit organizations with companies and other foundations, right? So, that networking event or that event that they hosted allowed me to make connections, particularly one that I've been working on for a long time, JP Morgan Chase. I've been looking at JP Morgan Chase. I think both of you know they've been investing in workforce development for some time, but I could not, if you go to their website, there's no information about who the right person to connect with there. So through that event, attending that event, I was able to actually connect with someone, exchange cards, and they were happy to have a conversation with me. So I want to talk just a little bit about sort of proposal development. So, you've done your due diligence on the front end, you put the right people in the room, you've made the connection, you have been very strategic, you've listened, you've done all your due diligence up front. So in terms of the proposal development, you get to this stage, again, I try to lead with the goals of the prospect in mind, right? So oftentimes, with the proposal, we're talking about, here are our objectives for this work, here's our project plan, here's our work plan, et cetera. I do think, though, within that context, it's important to lead with the goals of the prospect in mind, right? So if you know that prospect, let's take the equity example again that I used earlier, that prospect has an interest around equity, lead with equity, right? If that prospect in their strategy, that's, public on their website, their strategic plan, they have certain buzzwords that they use, incorporate those buzzwords into that proposal, right? Convey how your organization will advance their goals, right? Again, leading with the prospect in mind, right? Build in opportunities for engagement. So when you think about your work plan, think about touch points throughout the project period. So if it's an 18-month project, if it's a 24-month project, think about opportunities for engagement. Likewise, if it's sponsorship for a one-time event or, sponsorship for, a body of work, maybe a short body of work, again, building in and thinking about those opportunities for engagement on the front end. And then certainly we want to share and discuss plans to measure impact and ROI. So again, across the board, foundations and corporations are asking us to talk about how we will measure success, what success looks like, right? And then, again, keeping their goals in mind, think about how this advances their goals, their vision and values as well. So stewardship. Again, I just talked a little bit about building ongoing touch points into your project plan. So really want to, again, underscore that. I think this is not something that we want to leave to chance. This is not something that we want to say, okay, yeah, we know we want to do this, but not actually articulate it. I actually like to put it on paper, again, thinking about what those touch points will be, where in the project period those touch points will happen, et cetera. Engage strategically throughout the project period. Again, so thinking of meaningful ways to engage, not just, let's just have a touch point, but in key milestones, particularly if it's like a large scale body of work, think about within those milestones when, would be a good time to engage with your funder partner. Invite participation by the funder as a thought partner. So if it's a project or body of work where you're engaging a group of individuals outside of your organization, think about ways to include the prospect as part of that group, right? So inviting them to meetings, inviting them to conversations, inviting them to sit in, as you're meeting with those groups of individuals, right? So I think that's a really great way to engage them as a thought partner. And then leverage your shared networks. It's okay to ask a funder, certainly, who else should we be talking to about this body of work, right? Who else should we be engaging as we think about moving this work forward? So again, asking those questions. And likewise, how can we be helpful to you in terms of your strategy, in terms of, when you're thinking about things like ROI or future bodies of work, how can, we leverage our subject matter experts, our board, other connections that we have to advance your goals? So key takeaways, and I know I've gone through this really fast, so we'll have lots of time for questions. Again, start with the goals of your prospect in mind, and underscore that enough. That's certainly on the front end, when you're going into these conversations and the cultivation process, starting with those goals of proposal process. Again, start with those goals of the prospect in mind. Look for areas of shared synergy, right? So how does this body of work, how does our organization meet and help to fulfill your goals, your vision and values. Engage as thought partners. I've talked a lot about that. And then, strategically cultivate and steward to build that long-term engagement. At the end of the day, this is really about long-term partnership. This is not, give us $20,000 to help, sponsor an event. This is not give us $200,000 or $300,000 for a body of work. This is really about building long-term partnerships, long-term engagement, and, making sure that we are working together in a meaningful and thoughtful way that advances our shared vision. So really just want to drive that point home. So with that, I am done.
Well, you're not done yet. That was wonderful. Thank you. But I'm sure there'll be some questions. And I have to say, I'm going to definitely quote one of the things you said: never, ever, ever submit a proposal blindly without making a connection first. I think that should just be on everyone's wall. But wonderful presentation and insights. And I know we'll have some questions. If you have thoughts, questions, comments, please do put them in the Q&A section right now. This is a great opportunity to share ideas with one another, and that can include comments. If you have a difference of opinion, that's fine too. But since Bathsheba is here and sharing her time with us, I want to make sure we can make full use of her wisdom and experience in these subjects. So I know you could probably see some of this, Bathsheba, but do you want to take on any of these comments? I know we just had one from Diana talking about suggestions of language, for example, encouraging foundations.
Yeah. So why don't we start with that one, because that's a really good one. Yeah, so, I'll think personally for me, I don't let restrictions around, needing to have an invitation to apply stop me from at least trying to engage with them, right? So certainly, this is a case where we would not want to send a line proposal for sure. But yeah, absolutely, reaching out to them, getting on their radar screen, trying to get a meeting set up, it makes total sense in that case, right? Again, I would not build in language, but if you're also thinking about language in terms of inviting them to have a conversation, I would just simply say, listen, really interested in engaging, this is a little bit about the organization, we've taken a look at your, philanthropic goals, mission, vision, values, and, we really think that through this body of work, we can help to advance that. Would you be open to a conversation, right? So acknowledging up front that you get that you're invitation only, but, here's a really exciting body of work that we think can help to advance your, again, goals and mission, vision, and values. So, yeah, so I would start there, certainly. But again, I, for one, do not let that stop me. I mean, there are some funders that really adhere to that, and they really don't even want to engage. But I will say, in my experience, I found it to be the case that oftentimes they're at least willing to have a conversation. Whether or not you get funding is a separate issue, but they're at least willing to engage in a conversation. And we have actually been successful in some cases in engaging them and actually securing support for a project. So yeah, absolutely, don't let that stop you.
So when you see at the Foundation Center listing or something like that, and the Foundation Directory does not accept unsolicited proposals, that does not mean do not talk to us. And is that a fair summary?
Yeah, good point. Well said, Jay. Absolutely, well said. And in some cases, they might respond and say, okay, send us some stuff, right? So we won't give you a meeting, but send us some background. We'll take a look at it, and then we'll let you know if we want to talk, right? So yeah, but I certainly would not let that stop me. There are some major foundation players out there that are only open, they're not open rather to unsolicited requests. And, you look at what they're supporting, look at their strategy, and it's like, wow, we should definitely be partnering with them, right? So yeah, I absolutely would try to engage them. 100%.
Now, since I opened the floodgates, we've had a whole bunch of questions. The next one that came up talked about whether or not you see these strategies working also with individual major donors. Is that your experience there as well?
Yeah, let me say this. So I would say over time, certainly I am, my area of expertise is in the corporate foundation space. That being said, I will say that individual donors have gotten a lot more savvy over time, right? So they are almost operating in the vein of a foundation to some extent, right? So they really want to be strategic about their investments. They're very thoughtful about them. They too are asking questions about impact, right? They too are asking questions about, okay, what's different about your organization, right? So yeah, I would absolutely engage with them, and as thought partners, right? I would ask questions. I would listen, right? So I absolutely would use some of these same strategies with individual donors. I mean, I don't know what, if I had, colleagues on, I guess maybe Jay, I don't know what your thoughts are about this, but yeah, I would absolutely engage with them in that way. And in my experience, particularly the mega donors, yeah, they absolutely are being very thoughtful about where they're investing their dollars. Jay, what do you think?
Well, I love how you position much of this in starting with listening to people. That just seems like the thing we all want to do as humans, and it opens up a lot of doors. And you talked a lot about how to make that conversation possible, which was so important. With individuals, sometimes that occurs right there, whether it's the grocery store, the special event, or the thank you call. And so listening to people first is a great way to find out where their hearts are, so we can talk to them about the projects that are most meaningful to them. So yes, I agree with you. I think it's very important. We did have a comment from Jill, who looked at this in a regional context, where she was saying that that she's at a nonprofit in a county that's not necessarily very well off. There are a lot of people below the poverty line, for example, and she's wondering about how you might persuade grant funders to give them a look rather than dismissing them. I mean, at least that's the perception there, is that maybe they're not seen as the kind of thing that would be of appeal to a corporate or foundation donor. What are your feelings about that generally as a topic? And then is there any specific recommendation you have, Bathsheba, to help?
So I want to make sure I understand the question. So this is an organization that, is a smaller organization that kind of operates a little bit below the radar, and they're asking how can they better get on the, yeah. So that's, for an organization, a smaller organization, and I will say that my very first nonprofit that I worked with was very small. I think we started off, we had 10 people, and then we grew to 13 by the time I left. So I do have experience having worked for a smaller nonprofit as well. I think that's where the board can be really helpful, right? So to the extent that you have a board that is willing to engage, right, and they've got some connections, I think they can be really helpful in that regard. And then I would also say networking, picking up the phone, thinking about building partnerships too, right? So if there are ways that you can connect to other organizations that, let's say, perhaps have a bigger footprint, that can also help to kind of get in the door and start to engage with, some of those funders as well. But those would be kind of my initial thoughts on that. Again, looking at board relationships, leveraging those, networking, getting out there, making sure you're in spaces where you can kind of connect to those organizations. And then also, again, thinking about partnership building and ways that, you can kind of get in the door by working with some of the organizations that perhaps have a larger footprint. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that question, I'm wondering if maybe one of the concerns that smaller organizations might have is that they would be relatively invisible, but so would their causes. And I'm wondering if you think that that's necessarily true. I mean, if I'm at an organization that's serving a really indigent population, or a place that's really having financial difficulties, houseless people who need food services, kids at schools, whether it's free and reduced lunch, does that make it more or less appealing to institutional donors these days? I mean, is there an opportunity now maybe that we wouldn't have had a couple of years ago?
No, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. Yeah, and we did see with the pandemic, we did see a pivot in a lot of cases on the foundation side and on the corporate side to, support some of those organizations that were doing basic needs work, right? So we definitely saw a pivot there. So the question that I would have is, what are ways that we can sustain that interest and momentum that was started? I mean, I asked the same question around issues of DEI, right? So, we're all seeing the McKinsey Scotts and the Bloomberg gifts that are going to HBCUs, an example, right? I'd love to see that momentum sustained so that it's not sort of, the world is thinking about social equity now, so let me, so yeah, I think, the stewardship thing, I think would be really important there, and really thinking about, okay, what are some ways that I can stay connected to this funder, who is now responding to the needs as they exist now, right? How can I maintain that connection? But then also, again, how can I leverage my board? How can I leverage, individuals who have some influence, assuming, you're fortunate enough to have a board like that. I know not all of us are. But anyway, so those are some things that I think come to mind for me.
Now, one thing we might have control over, and I'm not sure how you'd use it. This is such a great question from Joseph, who asked, how can you use the project budget to enhance your proposal? Do you have thoughts on that?
So often what I've heard from funders is that the budget should tell a story also, right? So if it's a body of work and you're talking about, engaging, the public, you're talking about, touching individuals directly, then that needs to be reflected in the budget, right? So the budget also needs to tell a story. It needs to align with, the overall project in such a way that, it's clear that one is helping to advance the other, right? So in other words, let's not build in $200,000 for IT support and the project there's not really much of a tech focus project, but someone in your organization has decided, boy, we really need this money for our technology infrastructure, right? That's where that overhead comes into play. So no, I absolutely think that, or not think, absolutely know that most funders are looking for alignment when it comes to the budget, right? And ensuring that, whatever you're saying that you're going to do in the proposal, that's actually reflected in the budget, right? So making sure that those two things line up.
Oh, by the way, we always have this question, so I want to make sure I say this since some people may rotate off the meeting. First of all, the slides, that's entirely up to you, Bathsheba, if you want to either circulate the slides or not, and whether you want us to do it. Okay, so we can make those available. Thank you.
Yeah, if you could do that, that would be great.
Thank you so much for that. And I also want to make sure that people know how to contact you. We have a few more questions, but if someone does want to learn more from you or engage with you, what's the best way to reach out to you? Is that something they can do?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to put my email and let's see, I might need your help to do this, Jay. But I'd be
that's
happy
right.
to put
We might have to do that after the fact, or we can put it right in the question, actually in the question field. They won't be all be able to see that. I'll find a way to share that maybe in the in some way as we communicate with people after the session. But we'll make sure to make these slides available to you. And I want to make sure that everyone knows once again that a recording of this will be placed on the YouTube channel, the DonorSearch YouTube channel. So you'll be able to see this and also share it with colleagues who need to have this conversation with you about these issues as well. We did have a question about how, from Jim, who asked, how should we ask for combined in-kind and cash gifts? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. What I would say is that oftentimes, and in this case, I'm pretty sure we're talking about corporate. So oftentimes, in my experience at least, companies like to see a matrixed approach to giving, right? So we met with a company recently, and they actually asked, they said, there's only so much we can do on the dollar side. So we'd love you to also think about, sort of in-kind investment, whether it's tech, this was a tech company, pretty large one, whether or not there might be opportunities to invest in that way. And they had actually invested in the past on the in-kind side. We hadn't actually gotten cash from them. So it's the first time in a while we're actually talking about cash, which is great. But yeah, so I would just kind of build it in. Certainly have those conversations up front so that they're expecting this to be the case. But yeah, I would build it into the request. Hopefully, I know in some cases we're working from templates that funders give us, to actually develop our proposals. But assuming there is space in that to do that, to articulate, sort of what an in-kind gift might look like, how you would leverage it, how it would help to advance an overall body of work, or the organizations. I don't know if it would be like an unrestricted kind of thing. But yeah, I would absolutely build that in. But again, be sure to have those conversations up front. I hope that's specific enough to answer the question.
In fact, you managed to address, I think, 2 questions, because another person had asked about in-kind giving too. And these are things that come up. And what's wonderful about your answer is, once again, I guess you're focusing, as you taught us, to listen for where the opportunities are. They aren't always just, cash today. Sometimes it's a different kind of investment. Sometimes it's in kind, or a matrixed approach, as you said, might be more attractive and beneficial to the relationship. So there are lots of ways to think about this instead of just going in and sending off a proposal, God forbid. Yeah. We do have a great comment from James. This has always interested me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. If the nonprofit strategic plan, he says, has a significant change in goals and priorities, how do you manage the donor and sponsor relationship and expectations?
Honestly, that's one, as a person that's worked for organizations where priorities constantly shift. I think this is one where you just got to be very transparent. I'm a big fan and advocate for transparency with donors, right, and prospects. So, hopefully there's still alignment with the prospect, even within, the context of these shifting priorities. But yeah, I think just having the conversation directly to say, listen, and hopefully, I'm also going to assume here that there's a strategic reason why, the organization's plan is shifting, right? So maybe you've, done a degree of work, and based on what feedback you've gotten from your constituents and other stakeholders, you're determining that maybe we need to take a slightly different direction. So assuming and hopefully there is a good reason for that shift in direction, right? I think, frankly, just being really transparent with the donors. But again, I'm hopeful here that there is still alignment, right? And it's not a situation where, okay, we were doing X and now we're doing Z, and Z has absolutely nothing to do with your, philanthropic or sponsorship goals. But, assuming the former is true and there's still alignment, I just frankly think being transparent is the way I would go.
Well, and this might sound like a silly question, but and it's probably not a consistent answer either, but about frequency and contact, because you talked about the relationship, and that's so important. So if people think about this transactionally, which I know you've said not to do, but so we send a proposal and maybe we get some money, and then we send them a report every once in a while and we say, oh, we have to write these darn reports. That's one thing. But if we have a relationship, then we're probably talking with some degree of frequency. So if things are changing, they probably aren't just changing for us. They may be changing for them. So does the frequency of communication, how does that play into this?
So I'll tell you what we're doing. So we're actually meeting with our funders once a month, particularly on the grant side, right? So not so much on the sponsorship side. We meet with them less often, but we have Touchpoints. So, I talked about Gates earlier. We have a body of work that we're undertaking with Gates. We meet once a month on that. We have a body of work that we're undertaking with another foundation on the West Coast. We meet once a month on that, right? We have others where we meet a little bit less often. Maybe it's quarterly, but yeah, I build it at the front end, and and ask the donor too. Would this be helpful to you, right? So when you are at the point of securing funding, or in the cultivation process, as you're putting a proposal together, et cetera, ask. Would it be helpful for us to have get into a regular cadence of touch points throughout the course of the project? And oftentimes the response you'll get is yes, absolutely. It's rare that I've seen, particularly on the foundation side and even on the corporate side. And I know, when I'm saying corporate, the corporate foundations, and there's the typical sponsorship stuff. But yeah, it's rare that they would come back and say no. I mean, it is certainly, in some cases, they're like, yeah, no, I don't need to talk every month, but some kind of periodic touch point, or just shoot me a note, it's fine. I think it really depends on the nature of the project, the nature of the funding, and the nature, frankly, of the relationship. But yeah, I absolutely am a big fan of Touchpoints. Yeah. And it's also, I'll say to that point too, it's a great way to help cultivate that next gift. So for no other reason, right? You certainly want to steward the current grant, current sponsorship, current gift appropriately, but you're also, throughout this process, you also want to be thinking about and teeing them up for that next ask. And so it's a great way to do that.
I would think, I must imagine that just the frequency of communication would let you know if things are running hot or cold, just like in any relationship. Plus, it's better for them. I mean, it's if they may have money, but that doesn't mean that they just can give it out and all over the place. They have priorities too. Those are shifting sands, and they might be wanting to do more or different. And the only way you're going to know that is by, it's going to help them to give away that money more effectively too. Somebody asked, this is Rachel who asked about boards here, and we haven't talked much about that today, but it comes up in every single session. And this question is so great. How do you motivate your board of directors to want to use their networks, or maybe access their networks, to make connections with funders, especially these institutional grant makers? And of course, embedded in this is that hopefully they know who who is connected to an institutional grant maker. But putting it aside for a second, how do you navigate that? I mean, how do you help boards to do that?
Yeah, so this is a challenge that many of us face. Even at some of the larger institutions I've worked at, this has been a challenge. But so in my experience, setting expectations on the front end, right? So if you've got job descriptions for board members, I would write it in, right? Some expectation around, because their responsibility, part of their responsibility as board members is to ensure that the organization is financially stable and healthy, right? I mean, that technically is part of their role as board members. So I would put that out there at the beginning, at the onset, when you're onboarding board members. If you've got job descriptions, I know we don't always do this with board members, but you've got job descriptions written for them, then yeah, I think setting expectations up front, and then finding ways to engage them, right? Understanding that, these people are super busy. They've got, I've worked for 2 academic medical centers, and et cetera. And, these folks are really busy, these board members, right? So, but if there are ways that, you can engage with them in, the context of a regular meeting, right? If there are ways that you can, and then you always too, I feel like, at least in my experience, you always have those board members that are a little bit more engaged in the mission. They're really psyched about it. And so those oftentimes are like our best ambassadors. And they're just all in, and they're willing to do whatever they can, open, the Rolodexes, they'll do it all. Then you have those board members who are, they like you and they see the importance of the work, but they're just not as engaged or not as willing, right? So that's where I think, again, setting expectations on the front end. We may not get all board members to play. That's just the reality, but leveraging the ones that are excited, are engaged, are, have a willingness. And then again, I think just setting across the board, setting those expectations on the front end are really important. So hopefully you've got buy-in from your leadership, because I have worked in places where it's like, we don't want to do that with the board.
Right. Well, hey. Yes. Buy-in from the leadership, clarity on paper or whatever we're using now. I mean, all of that helps, right? Clear communications make for less misunderstandings and tension. Not always, but often. And speaking of which, I want to be clear also, we've had 38 questions here. I know we've only scratched the surface, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and especially of yours, Bathsheba. I really appreciate your sharing all this with us, and your willingness to share the slide deck. So if you missed that, we'll make sure that this is sent out to you, those who are attending. And once again, I know I'm repeating myself, but it bears repeating. The recording of this will be on YouTube, so you can engage with it there, and I'll find some way that you can find Bathsheba Philpott and right out there in the world and speak with her if she has time and you are willing to do that. But I can tell you, because she has one of the most extraordinary names I know in fundraising, that you should be able to find her even if you never got an email address from us. And you can find her right there at ACE. So that's an organization you want to know, as well as knowing her. So I'll encourage you to take advantage of this content and all these forums, as well as her offer to be a friend out here in the field for you. You've seen exactly how much value she can add to your understanding of this work today. I do also want to say, oh, and there we go. There's your email, which is, in case you're not reading it, because not everybody can see this, is bphilpott, so BPHILPOTT at acenet.edu. And also, we were asked about DonorSearch here. And for those who missed the preamble, we love DonorSearch, and we especially love they're providing a platform to have these discussions, which they've been doing since 2016. There are over 500 sessions like this. We're going to have 90 this year. But we don't talk about all the wonderful things we could talk about DonorSearch here. However, there's something on your screen. If you just toggle down, you'll see if you're interested in the DonorSearch solutions, you can click on that and learn more. And I would encourage you to talk to them. They're some of the friendliest people you'll find in the space, and they will not try and get you to do something. They'll just offer to help you if they can, and chances are they can. But I'll leave it at that. You can learn more about them at DonorSearch.net. And while you're there, you can take a look under the Resources tab and see all the next sessions, which include, of course, the podcast coming up with Armando Zumaya, the founder of Somos El Poder. And also, he's the Chief Development Officer at Catholic Charities of San Francisco. That podcast is being released tomorrow on your favorite podcasting platforms. And next week, we have Poonam Prasad talking about making the most of your new year-end donors. And that's coming up next Thursday at 3:30 p.m. So I hope you'll join us for that. But with that, I just want to thank you. Of course, thank Bathsheba, and encourage you all to enjoy the rest of the series. And most importantly, stay healthy out there. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Till then, take care.
Thank you, everyone.